When you think of things in your lifestyle that can increase the risk of heart disease, one of the first things that come to mind is probably smoking, and the next, I'll bet you, is saturated fat. So you might be surprised to hear that there's a bit of a row going on about this. A leading expert has questioned whether saturated fat is all it's cracked up to be. He claims it's a bit of a furphy. What are we to make of this argument? Well, I asked a leading expert in fats, Professor Peter Clifton, who's the co-author of the CSIRO Diet.
In end of 2010, CSIRO published this collection of studies of populations that have reported on their diet, particularly the amount of saturated fat they ate, and they'd been followed for a varying period of time, 10 to 15 years, to see what they died from. And the conclusion was, against all expectations really, was that saturated fat did not increase the rate of deaths from heart disease or from stroke.
So they said, well, that means saturated fat has no relationship with heart disease.
That's exactly what they concluded. Now that obviously is a great shock, seeing as all the heart foundations around the world have said saturated fat is a bad guy and it's going to increase your risk of heart disease and will put up your cholesterol.
So?
Well, the answer is it does put up your cholesterol, but it only puts up your cholesterol a little bit. So the difference between the groups that consumed the most saturated fat versus the least was about 10% of energy.
Why is it so?
And that's a big difference really in terms of diets. But what that does to cholesterol is only about a 0.3 millimole change in the bad cholesterol in LDL.
What you've got to separate in your mind here is the effect of saturated fat on your cholesterol, in particular the bad form, LDL, and secondly, how that translates, the effect of saturated fat on your cholesterol, on your risk of heart disease. The thing is that saturated fat does raise your LDL, the bad form of cholesterol, but only by a little. So that means it doesn't have a big impact on your risk of heart attacks. Now, this might be a surprise for a lot of us, because the link between saturated fat and heart disease looms large.
They do assume it looms large, and that's because the Heart Foundation keeps on saying reduce your saturated fat. But I guess other evidence from intervention trials, which are done more than 20 years ago, showed that if you took saturated fat out of your diet and replaced it with carbohydrate, and you got that change in LDL cholesterol, the small change of 0.2 or 0.3, you saw no reduction in events, no reduction in heart disease, no reduction in stroke. If, however, you replace it with polyunsaturated fat, so that liquid fat that lowers cholesterol a little bit, you actually got a great benefit that was far beyond the change in cholesterol. So there seemed to be more benefit from reducing saturated fat and replacing it with polyunsaturated fat in terms of reduction in events, which was of the order of somewhere between 15 and 30%, much, much more than you'd expect based on the LDL changes. So polyunsaturated fat has special effects as well beyond just changing LDL cholesterol.
So the problem with saturated fat isn't so much the saturated fat itself, but the fact that it's elbowing out the healthier fats which could in fact protect your heart. And here the evidence is stronger for polyunsaturated fats than monounsaturated, like olive oil.
Well, there's absolutely no evidence from any trials that has any effect. No one has done any trials replacing saturated fat with any kind of monounsaturated fat, olive oil or otherwise.
So
all you've got for olive oil is the associations with Mediterranean diet, and there's no doubt that every time you study any population and look at how much they have a Mediterranean style diet, which is variably defined, it's always protective. Now it may be the olive oil in it, it may be some other component, the increased fruit and vegetables, the greater amount of legumes, less meat, less dairy, etc. So it's hard to know what the cause of the benefit of the Mediterranean diet, but it's pretty clear whether you look at it around the Mediterranean or in America, the Mediterranean diet is protective against not only heart disease but also cancer and Alzheimer's. The polyunsaturated fat really that one talks about is linoleic acid, the N6 factor. So this comes out of safflower oil, sunflower oil, canola oil. So most common oil seeds are mostly linoleic acid. So that's the major polyunsaturated we eat. So we might eat anything up to 10 grams a day of that.
what about omega-3 fatty acids, because they're polyunsaturated fatty acids?
They are polyunsaturated, that's right. And there's, some people believe that the benefit seen from the polyunsaturated fat interventions was related to the short-chain omega-3s and had nothing to do with linoleic acid. So omega-3 comes in two forms, really, short-chain and long-chain. So the short-chain comes from plants, and we can slowly convert it up to a long-chain. And the long-chain we tend to get from fish as the major source, and that comes from the fish eating algae. And the algae itself actually make the long-chain omega-3s.
And which is thought to be better for us?
The long-chain are clearly better Whether the short chain actually within itself has any benefit is not clear, but it might well be antithrombotic, prevent clots from occurring.
So summarise this confusing picture: low fat, low carb, high carb,
Yeah.
saturated fat, olive oil versus polyunsaturated.
So if I were advising a patient, I would tell them to reduce their saturated fat, so cut off solid fat from meat particularly, not use palm oil containing products because that's got saturates in it, and any fat they're going to use polyunsaturated fat in a cooking oil, liquid cooking oil, or in a margarine, and to try to increase their polyunsaturated fat as much as possible, and at the same time eat fish a couple of times a week, because there's good epidemiological data suggesting people that eat fish do better in terms of preventing heart disease.
And what about that expensive extra virgin olive oil that's in the shelf of most middle class households?
Well, it tastes great, so it's really nice on salads. So whether it does any good health-wise, who knows? But I certainly wouldn't stop people from buying it, but I wouldn't suggest that's the oil they have to buy to get protection. I think ordinary old, safflower, sunflower oil is fine.
And carbs, replacing the fat with carbs?
Replacing the fat with carbs does not appear to have had any benefit whatsoever in the interventions. So if you like carbs and you cut down your fat, the carbs you need to replace them with should be high fibre, low glycemic, whole grain kind of carbs, because they're associated with protection from heart disease. So there's quite a lot of epidemiology that says the more whole grain you eat, the lower the rate of heart disease and type 2 diabetes. So there are good carbs as well as bad carbs. So I think one can encourage the use of carbs in replace of saturated fat, providing they're of high quality.
And what about just lowering your fat to very low levels regardless of what fat you eat?
There are some downsides to that in that inevitably when you lower fat and increase carbohydrate, even good quality carbohydrate, your triglyceride tends to rise and your HDL tends to fall, which are cardiovascular risk factors, increasing the risk of cardiovascular disease. So it's difficult to know whether you're doing any good or not by doing that.